Hi there, I'm Rick Kogan of the Chicago Tribune and various radio stations around town. In reading this book, this new book, Records Truly Is My Middle Name by John Records Landecker, it occurred to me somewhere about 2/3 of the way in that I might get to a last chapter, did I not know John, and start reading, well, it was a dark night. Mr. Landecker, with an open bottle of vodka in the seat next to him, was driving 95 miles an hour down a Chicago side street when the car swerved, hit a lamppost, and Mr. Landecker died. I am so happy that's not the way this book ends. I'm so happy to see you, John Landecker, but it could have ended that way.
It could have actually ended that way. In fact, it came close to the scene you were describing. There was a scene that was somewhat like that, and I'm going, how did he know?
Yeah. Well, because it's in the book. Unlike many of the people who interviewed for this, I've read the book.
Appreciate that.
Records Truly Is My Middle Name. If you want to know why that is, read the book. You write in here that it took several years to pull this together. Mm-hmm. You did it with the help of a former producer, now big-time book publisher, Rick Camper.
That's right.
But what compelled you to do it? I mean, he came up to your house and said, John, sit down, tell me some stories.
I'm pretty sure it's Rick sort of providing the momentum to do this. One, I had the time because I was out of work.
Right.
Rick was urging me to do it, and I think you can appreciate this. I felt that there were stories here that were interesting.
Yeah, well, no question.
That have nothing to do with me per se, or radio, or anything else. Just stories, stories.
Well, it says here, I mean, in here you say someone came up to you and once said, you're a celebrity on some level.
Yeah.
That's a line you could build a novel around.
Yeah.
You were, John, in your time, as big a celebrity as there ever was in this town, without wearing football pads.
Well, thank you.
Let's go back to the early part. I think too many people, I'm afraid, are going to go into this book and say, oh, let's see where he got high. Let's see where he married his third wife.
That's all in there.
I know it is, and that's what people go to. It's like reading an old Terry Southern novel.
Right.
We're the dirty parts. But your family and your background is fascinating me. Your dad was a professor.
At the University of Michigan, sociology.
I think people don't really realize that and know that. Your mom was kind of a farm girl.
Kinda. Totally.
Yeah.
Total farm girl from south of Indianapolis, Indiana. Little stretch of road called Hopewell near Franklin. And they met at IU. My dad was a German Jew who fled the Nazis in World War II and ended up teaching graduate courses at IU. And my mom was a student, and that's where they met.
How did that combination form you as a young man? We're relatively the same age, and many of you listening out there are certainly the same age. You come of age in these 60s in this country, and your relationship with your parents is not always the healthiest or most nurturing. Your parents seem to be very good people.
They were fantastic people. It was a bit of good cop, bad cop, however. Mm-hmm. My dad, very strict, saw things a certain way, removed totally from pop culture, 100%.
See, that's an interesting thing that got even a little more tense as you got older. He literally didn't know what you did for
Not really.
Yeah.
Thanks to Scott Simon and All Things Considered, did a feature that included me, and it played on the University of Michigan radio station, WUOM in Ann Arbor, which of course was a public station, and all the professors listened to it.
Yes,
and when
of
it was
course.
on, everybody called the house, and my dad understood that there was some sort of something going on. But when he was out of the house, anything could happen, and I was upstairs as a kid in elementary school doing my homework, and all of a sudden I heard blasting from downstairs. I think it was Johnny Horton, The Battle of New Orleans, which my father would never put up with, but my mom liked, So she blasted it, and we'd go visit my grandfather, William J. Records, in southern Indiana.
Hence the middle name. There you go. Explain. Perfectly.
And then we'd drive through Indianapolis, and I'd be in the back seat under a sleeping bag, listening to WIBC, which is an AM rock station, under the sleeping bag, head up against the window with a transistor so my dad wouldn't hear it.
You came out, you write in the book, and again, here is the book. You write, I came out face first, a metaphor for how I would live the rest of my life. The metaphor would be if you had jumped out of your mother and started running somewhere really fast would be the ultimate metaphor if that were possible. Okay, what first hooked you on radio, and what was your first job, John Landecker?
What hooked me on radio? I don't remember a time when I wasn't hooked on radio. Part of it had to do with my dad being blind, I think, subconsciously. It was a way to reach him. Two, television was just really starting out when I was a kid, so we were the last people on the block to have a TV. My dad brought home a dictaphone from work, a really early recording device. I talked into it, played it back, heard my voice. That was that. I was always interested in radio. I made tapes for, I went to University of Michigan High School, which allowed a lot of freedom in what you did, and some of the classes let me record projects as opposed to writing them. My girlfriend at the time, her aunt was the quote-unquote woman's editor of a
They
local...
used to have such things.
A woman's editor on a local radio station, and got me a meeting with the program director, who was also the afternoon guy when I was probably a junior, senior in high school. And that was it.
That was it.
That was it.
Talking about women,
Yes.
you've had 4 marriages and 18,400. You're like Wilt Chamberlain.
No, I'm not like Wilt Chamberlain.
Not Wilt Chamberlain, but a number of
thousands
romances. A number of
Wilt
romances
Chamberlain.
through the years, and I'm telling you, people, the reason to read some of the early pages and not skip to the marriages is the reason I believe that you had 4 marriages and a number of relationships is your first real television crush was Annette Funicello, and that would do in any man.
How is that? What's the logic behind that?
One Mouseketeer in particular
Well-
had an impact on me, Annette Funicello.
Well, a lot of guys my age, Annette Funicello impacted. I don't think everybody who liked
You don't
Annette-
blame her? Have you ever
No.
written her a letter?
I
saying-
interviewed her once on the phone.
And did you say, look, I've been married 4 times?
No, at that
and it's
time I'd
your
only been
fault."
married twice, so I
So
couldn't
you couldn't
say.
really jump
No.
on. You couldn't really get at her. Your first, one of your first great love was your first wife and the mother of your kids.
Yes.
That relationship lasted, I think, 12, 13 years, correct?
Oh, longer than that. We were married.
Oh, you were married for 12 or 13.
and we were dating since the middle of the 8th grade.
Yeah, and you got married relatively early, which may
Yes.
not be conducive to having the kind of radio career which you had.
Never thought about that. That could be true, but
Yeah.
it didn't seem to factor in at all.
Did it factored into the family, though? As
Oh, of course.
Because as you got and became more successful, the family kind of took the brunt of that celebrity of a
Oh,
sort.
yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. There was a bit of that. I don't think it's an unheard of scenario where somebody is more, quote unquote, the center of attention, and the person who is their significant other feels slighted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The celebrity portion of this book, and you were not just a celebrity of sorts, John Landecker, you were a certifiable celebrity listened to by millions, if you can believe it in this radio day and age, millions of listeners. You came to WLS in 1972 after dilly-dallying, and it's all in the book. I'm not going to chart this. You're smart people watching this show. That was an amazing place at that time.
That was an amazing place.
Describe
Yes,
it for
indeed.
those. I remember, the radio under my pillow, and I know a lot of people out there do too. Describe it at the time, John.
Well, it was the perfect radio storm. And looking back, I don't think, and I can only speak for myself, I don't think any of us there at the time really realized what we were doing. There was a synergy, if you will, between all departments. Everybody was everybody's friend. All the air staff, there was no animosity, no ego trips, no jealousy, because we all enjoyed each other's company. We showed up on other programs unannounced. We hung out together on the weekends. We quote unquote partied, if you will, went to restaurants as a group, hung out, had a great time. The in-house expression was that we used the radio station as a tool for our amusement. And if we were amused, that was it. And then this translated into just gigantic ratings.
Well, and also translated into you couldn't listen all the time and you were too inside, but I'm speaking for myself and a generation of Chicagoans. It translated into some kind of honestly compelling. You guys may have been a little crazy.
Yes.
But it was honestly compelling. Is that a phrase that you'd like?
Sure, absolutely.
Bob Surratt, and one of the hallmarks of this book is Rick Kampfer interviewed a number of people who were in your circle.
Yes, that's right.
I got to ask him if there were any that didn't want to talk, but that's
I'm
another
sure there
thing.
were, although
Bob
he
Surratt,
hasn't told
with
me.
whom you have had a good, long, very healthy relationship,
Yep.
says in here, there wasn't really any competition at all, not friendly or otherwise, at WLS in the 70s, given the current nature of radio. That's almost impossible to believe, isn't it?
Yeah, and it didn't last forever.
Yeah.
But there was a stretch of a few years where that definitely was the calling card, and that combined with very big promotions, advertising budgets, and a program director that you knew you could get away with stuff. And he, although
gave you
although
a
he
job.
wouldn't say, go break the rules.
It was a long leash.
Yes, and we didn't try to shock people, but we would stretch the envelope as much as possible in a good way.
One of the general managers quoted in this book, a guy named Marty Greenberg, says, of those years, we were the New York Yankees and we didn't even know it.
Right.
I gotta believe that when you and Bob went out or when you hooked up with football players, you went out, you never sensed the, oh my God, aren't you John Landecker?
No.
Aren't you John Landecker? What can
Nope.
I, never.
Nope.
How was that
It
possible?
wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It just wasn't like that. We were, I don't think people, listeners actually elevated us to some sort of celebrity status. I think that they were, listeners and were sort of in on the joke, if you will. I mean, it was, we wouldn't be stopped on the street. Not that many people knew what we looked like, first of all. And, I saw that figure from the Scott Simon piece about 5 to 6 million people listening. And I had if I had known that, I'd have asked for a lot more money.
If you had known that, would you have behaved any differently? It's always an amazing thing to be in a radio studio. You don't really get a sense of audience. You don't really sense it out there.
No.
If you knew that, if you had known that, I know you knew people were listening, you saw the ratings, but if you sat there and said, oh my God, 5 million people are listening to me right now, would you have been any different?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think you would have.
Because
either.
it really wasn't about that. If I felt it was happening and the engineer was responding to what I was doing, that was really the key.
Yeah.
Whether or not anybody was listening or not, I mean, we knew people were listening because the ratings were good. But beyond that, it was more of an internal situation.
What
where
broke
you please
all that?
yourself.
What broke up those golden days at LS?
Well, there were a lot of things that happened. I don't know what kind of chronological order they would be in. Let's see. One of the things would be that WCFL, our main competition, changed format. So you've lost your competitor, which sounds like a great thing, and I guess it is to a certain extent, but it takes the edge off.
Yep.
It's impossible. Bob Surratt left, went to television. So shifts changed, and the dynamic inside the station subtly changed. For me, alcohol, drugs became part of the equation. So that had an effect on my performance and my attitude.
The marriage, dissolution of the
Yeah.
marriage around the same time. I quote from the book, and this is obviously what you people want to read, so go to page 129 when you get the book.
When you follow along.
Yeah, but do read it in order. One night I was higher than a kite on cocaine, and I decided I wanted to see what this new car, this Alfa Romeo, could do, so I floored it on a Chicago side street. This was, John, the era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and certainly I participated in
What?
various,
No.
straight shooting Rick Kogan. A lot of you people did. You know what this time was like. Did you feel like you were losing control, or did you just feel part of this larger generational party?
It goes in stages. At first, I definitely felt I was part of a generational party. Then later on, I felt like I lost control.
Was there any one special thing that made you feel that? I mean, there are incidents in the book, and I don't want to replay them here.
No, not one.
Yeah.
It just got to the point where I realized that something was really wrong. It wasn't a specifically horrific
moment.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are people who have horrific moments and have
Oh, sure, and who have
realizations
quit
like that,
because
but
of
that
that.
wasn't my case.
Part of the thing here, how much did that kind of behavior, drinking in the studios, you talk in here once about arriving at work with a bottle of vodka from the night before and finishing off that day. Do you think, when in thinking back, did that hurt your career in any actual way, like making you less energetic on the air, making bosses think less of you? How do you think it affected your career?
I've never had a comment from a boss about this. The day that you're referring to, I was caught and allowed to finish the shift. After the shift, the general manager took me to a bar.
And said, "You've got a problem here, Mr. Landecker."
My agent said, "What's the matter with you? Why don't you just smoke pot?"
That agent was Saul Foos.
That agent was Saul Foos.
We're going to talk about him in a moment. One of the most fascinating characters in the history of local media. But go ahead.
So I
they
never
took it as
I never got a specific reaction from a general manager. But I mean, how could it not affect
Yeah,
you?
and I'm
I
saying
mean, come on.
now with this,
How could it not?
You have historical perspective here. It must.
Of course it did.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly
Sure.
what it was. I'm talking about an overall experience. I mean, if you wake up and one of your prime goals is to get to a fast food restaurant to load up on grease before you go to work because you're hungover, obviously this is not the way to.
Yeah.
This is not the stairway to success.
Did you think at this time, and as you leave LS eventually, for a good job, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Canada, CFTR was great. I cut back on my excesses. I worked very hard, and it was very successful, and it was a very good station.
And what happened up there? Why'd you leave there?
I left there because I missed my kids. My oldest daughter had been on a trip to Europe and with her class, and one of the students had stepped off of a sidewalk and was killed. And the opportunity was afforded me to come back, and I took it.
You admit in the book on many levels that during the what shall I call them, John, the raucous days, that you weren't the best father.
Oh, no. Absolutely not.
And
How could you be?
But I think even at the time it was a big regret to you. You loved your daughters.
Oh, absolutely. I put them in situations that kids shouldn't be in. I exposed them to things that children shouldn't be exposed to. I wasn't there emotionally to support them.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't mean that I didn't love or care for them. It just meant that I was drinking and doing drugs
His
and really
relationship
couldn't control
with,
that.
I know Amy is an actress of,
Yes.
Of high quality. How are the girls now? What's
They're
your
very good.
relationship with them like? And I call them girls. They're,
Excellent.
They're young women.
My oldest daughter, Tracy, has written a book. It's on Warner Brothers Rhino Records.
It's a bad thing to have two authors in the
It's,
same family. You should have dissuaded her somehow.
It's on the Shangri-Las.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's about the Shangri-Las, this girl group from the mid-'60s.
From our era, yeah.
The leader of the pack and stuff like that.
What intrigued her about why?
Well,
that?
she got into the rock scene. She got into rock music, and she.
Oh, hard to believe.
And she says in the book that part of that has to do with the wide variety of music that was played in our house.
Sure.
Everything from Bette Midler to Frank Zappa. So, and there was a jukebox in the kids' room, and she also writes about that. That everything from, I can't remember the exact songs that she heard, but she references
What does she
a
think
wide
now
variety.
that she's an author? What does she think of this book?
They
Have
haven't,
the kids
the
read
kids
it?
haven't seen this yet.
Are you trepidatious at
No.
all? Is there anything in here that they don't know?
Oh, sure. There must be.
Yeah.
But I'm not,
Worried.
no.
Because it really is. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I've read a lot of so-called celebrity of a sort biographies. This is a terribly, astonishingly honest book. That's about your father being blind and all sorts of other things. And there are a number of celebrities throughout this book, everybody from John Travolta to, Bill Zany. One of the interesting ones is your relationship with Dennis DeYoung, a great friend of mine.
Yes, I know.
And a
Yeah.
genuine human being who stayed here. Talk about Dennis is, for those of you who don't remember, the founder and songwriter for the band Styx.
Yes.
Now having a very successful solo career. Some of the friendships that one builds being in the business you're in are about as frivolous and BS as possible.
Not
the one
Dennis.
with Dennis is not.
Not Dennis. Dennis isn't BS. He's a very intelligent, creative, complex individual.
Funny, too.
Funny. I've interviewed him. I've done radio shows with him. I've obviously seen him in concerts. And that relationship really was something that came out of a coincidence. Styx was trying to get the song Lady on the air at WLS.
Yeah.
And finally they did, and I was the first one to play it and said something really creative like, Styx, welcome to WLS.
This is a really good song.
And played the song, and Dennis...
The next thing you know, they've sold 25 million
Yeah,
albums.
and Dennis told me that he danced with his wife, Suzanne, in the kitchen when they heard that.
That's a wonderful story in this book. Your relationship with Bob Surratt, too, has withstood the test of time.
Yeah.
It's withstood the test of various jobs, different careers.
Yes, it has.
He's remained a dear friend. That's
Yes,
got to
he
be,
has.
when you get to a certain age, and this book is going to be released on the 29th of March, which is the 66th birthday party of this young-looking fellow here, John Landecker. But when you get to a certain age, those kinds of things, those friends that you're able to have through the proverbial thick and thin, become so much more important. That's really what matters, isn't it? I get that sense
Oh, no,
here.
absolutely. I mean, Bob and I, in the heyday at WLS, I can't tell you how many things we did together. Now, obviously, over the years, I go to Canada, he went to New York, he left the radio station, he went into TV. So we really didn't see each other that much anymore, but we never actually lost contact for any stretch of time.
Yeah.
And he's always been very, very good to me. Allowed me to be asked me to be on Channel 11 when he did Chicago
When you're
Night.
doing movie reviews,
Do
sure.
movie
When Bob
reviews.
was on 11, sure.
I would raid the Bob Surratt show back in the 70s when we had guests.
Right.
And steal them a couple of times. One time it was Sylvester Stallone. The other time it was Mel Brooks. And he never complained.
Yeah.
No, he's
Yeah.
a great guy.
Your life's amazing. On page 201, it says, I haven't had a drink since. That's many, many, many years ago. Your career now, you're on WLS in the afternoons.
And nights.
At night.
Yeah.
How do you find it now? The whole radio landscape from those glory, there's never going to be another LS in the 70s, is there?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Not in the way we know it, no. I mean, there may be something in the future where there's a group of people on some sort of medium that
Maybe
every-
like
everybody-
this,
everybody
whatever
flo-
June
who knows?
Lanzer's
Could be
doing
that
here.
everybody-
Maybe this will be it.
that everybody flocks to, but no,
Yeah.
there won't be. Radio has dramatically changed the landscape of it ever since the mid-90s when single companies were allowed to own
Conglomeration of radio.
almost as many radio stations as they wanted, which turned the goal of radio, at least in my opinion, away from programming for the listener, and you started programming for the stockholder. And that just, that doesn't lead to entertainment.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing from Dan Rather about television.
Right.
Were you never seduced by television? Were you?
Well,
you
I
did
tried
bits-
to seduce television.
Yeah,
Television
it's a
never-
hard thing to do.
Television
yeah, that's a
never
hard
really
thing
fell
to
for
do.
me.
Television's now a net funicello.
Sure, I tried television. Even in the 70s, Bob and I would appear on numerous muscular dystrophy telethons.
Yeah.
When I worked in Cleveland, I won a local Emmy for a piece on a local magazine show. I've tried television. It just that when I went to college, I majored in radio and TV.
Yeah.
It's just that TV never happened.
Well,
Radio seemed to happen.
I think in many ways that people were, and I think you do a remarkable job of capturing how that is in this book, Records Truly Is My Middle Name, that people are born for certain things.
It appears.
If they're lucky enough,
Yeah.
they stumble on it.
Yes.
And I think in your case, it's radio. Before I let you go, before we end this thing, Saul Foose is one of the most fascinating characters in this book, in the history of media in Chicago. The name is not resonating out there. Could you tell people who, because he's a big part of your book and a big part of your life.
Yes, Saul Foose was an agent. He was an agent to radio and TV personalities, I think mostly radio. At one point, it appeared that it seemed that he represented everybody. Tom Joyner, Doug Banks, Larry Lujak, Fred Winston, myself.
I think Tim Weigel for a while.
Maybe.
I have some memory of that.
Could be.
But everybody, you're right, everybody.
And he started as my agent in the mid-'70s when a general manager of WLS had a contract come up, said, you need an agent, which in itself is very uncharacteristic of general managers.
Yes, it's like
to urge
here,
you to
we'll
get
give you this.
representation is
Yeah.
like,
it's like,
please,
well, no, we may have to give 10% more.
yeah, please get somebody to represent you in our battles. Okay, so I met Saul, and he was the best, just the best guy, best friend, supporter, thick and thin, when you're down, when you're out, when you're up, when you're going. Nothing stops Saul. Great guy, loved him. He was an extravagant personality. He lived very well.
He could afford to. Yeah.
He loved to say, it's good to be the king. And he asked me, this is at least 15, 17 years into our relationship, if I wanted to make an investment. That he was going to make investments for his clients and guaranteed that we wouldn't lose money. So I sent him, I think it was about $30,000 at the time to invest. And time goes on, he's got my money. I have a situation in Cleveland where I was working, where that ended. Saul hired me to work in his office.
That's a fascinating part of this
as
book.
an agent.
As an agent. John Landecker, the agent. Anybody out there know that?
And
I actually think you would have been really good at that, but
well,
what do I know?
I made the commitment to do that.
Yeah.
And then a local station here at the time, WJMK 104.3, kept asking about me working there, and I went over there and did a show, and Saul said, you have to take this job. And I said, well, okay, but you told me that I had to make this decision. And I'd also heard some very
scary rumors
about working for a certain general manager over at this radio station, who was at best erratic. So I said,
aren't they all?
not like this guy was really erratic. I said, okay, I'll take this, but only if I can still have my office here, and if this thing over here falls through, I'll come back. He said, okay. So one day I got through with my air shift, and I walked into the office, and there was this guy I'd never seen, and he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, I work here. And he said, no, you don't. And it was the Federal Marshal's office or wherever.
Yeah.
Saul was running a Ponzi scheme and was being arrested, charged, all of that. Office closed down. And Ponzi schemes are, you take money from everybody and redistribute it to other
Paying
people.
them off, and then eventually you run out of money.
But you don't ever invest anything for anybody.
It's a fascinating story in this book. There are a number of fascinating stories. The book will sell, of course, because the wild and raucous and crazy days of being a DJ in Chicago, but there's a lot more in this. I recommend that you read the entire thing, because some of these stories, John, it must have been not painful to tell, but must have really emotionally been difficult. I guess it's to Rick Campert's, he's publisher / psychiatrist, I guess. Some of them must have been. I mean, it's hard to look, it's always hard to look back when everything wasn't just a barrel laughs.
The toughest things, actually, when I emotionally writing it, had to do with my kids.
Yeah, I bet.
Really, the other stuff it's what happened. I don't live my life that way anymore. As a matter of fact, after I stopped drinking and doing drugs, the only thing to write about is what goes on at the radio station. Because
who wants to read that?
All the drama is gone.
Who cares about
where's
that?
the excitement?
And then I had a meeting with the program director,
and we did this bit,
and then we decided that we should do the news at the 7s.
Right.
No, he said maybe the 8s. Well,
Right.
thank you.
I
No
mean,
one wants to read that
who
book.
Yeah,
thank you. John, do you think in many ways, and this is again, before I close this off, it's a story of a generation. It's a story of our generation. To lesser degrees, everything. Fewer wives in this case, smaller crush on Annette Funicello, not as good jobs in the radio business. Do you think there's another book in you, John? I mean, was this got
Man, I don't think so. I have no idea. I've not thought about that. No, I don't think so.
Well, we'll see how publisher Rick Camper treats you and gives you your royalties.
I don't know
on this.
what. I have no idea what it would be about.
John, it's a remarkable thing.
Thank
You're
you,
alive. It's a remarkable thing. You have a huge generation of people such as John Brandmeier, who you influenced, Bob Surratt, who you've helped get to the top of the television
I think it's
ranks.
the other way around.
And there would be no Sticks without John Landecker.
Oh, wait a minute. That's a
doesn't say
gross
that in the book.
overstatement.
He doesn't say it in the book. I'm saying it. He's great friends with Dennis DeYoung and a number of other people. It's a fascinating life, all chronicled in Records. Truly is my middle name by John Records Landecker. And I've never seen this on a book before. Produced by, not edited by, not with,
Right.
produced by Rick Camper.
There's a reason.
Because
One of the
he was
ways
a
I wrapped my
producer.
head around doing this book was to pretend that it was a radio show.
Interesting, very
Okay, here's what
interesting.
we're going to do. I'm not going to write a book. I'm writing a radio show that happens to be on paper. So you're not a co-author, Rick, you're the producer. So that's why it says
Yeah, you
producer.
fellows have done a remarkable job.
Thanks.
John Landecker, it's an ongoing
Thank
pleasure
you.
to know you.
Thank you, Rick.
Sober or not.